not only the medical and what your rights are and getting you the access to services. Transportation is another huge barrier. Trying to get to the doctor's appointments on a regular basis, especially if you have other children, and knowing if it's one parent taking care of more than one child at home during the day, and trying to utilize a bus system to get to your medical appointments. Transportation is a barrier. There are a lot of things that go into navigating a healthy pregnancy, and we want to try and eliminate as many barriers as possible.
Welcome to the With You at Every Step podcast. We address your healthcare questions and help you navigate life's challenges. Our guests share their expertise and real-world advice related to care for older adults, grief and healing, and pregnancy and parenting. EveryStep is a nonprofit healthcare and human services organization offering dozens of programs that are there when people need us most. Learn more about our free and low-cost services at everystep.org. Thank you for listening. And here is our host, Polly Carver-Kimm.
Welcome to With You at Every Step, where we try to answer some of your questions about healthcare issues in Iowa, in central Iowa specifically, and also issues that are affecting the people that we serve, and maybe some of the people you know in your community as well. So we have Jen Groves with us today. She's the Vice President of Community Health Services here at EveryStep. And Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Polly.
We're very glad to have you here. We wanted to talk a little bit about maternal health, because we see in the headlines a lot about the challenges with maternal health, particularly in Iowa, concerning maternal mortality. And so I guess just to begin with, could you kind of paint a picture of what maternal health encompasses and the kind of things that bring a woman to a successful outcome with the birth of a child, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, when we're talking about maternal health care, there's some specific times that we think about. We think about the antepartum or the pregnancy period. We think about the delivery, and then sometimes that newborn phase for the kiddo, and that postpartum phase for the birthing parent, usually typically mom. We really at EveryStep, through a variety of grants and educational opportunities, really think about maternal or childbearing period in healthcare as much longer. We start to think about child spacing and things like that, even preconception. We think about, obviously, we have a slew of services that are able to support families during the pregnancy and then directly after birth and postpartum. But really that postpartum period, traditionally we think of maybe 6 weeks post-delivery. What we're finding now is that some of the worst health outcomes occur for folks up to a year after delivery. And so really looking at that expanded postpartum period is going to be something that's essential when we're talking about successful births and maternal health outcomes, as well as some of the biggest barriers.
Wow. So what are the, that shocked me, the statement about a year after the birth of a child. What are some of the outcomes or the things that can go wrong a year after a baby's born?
Absolutely. So if we're thinking about, first of all, pregnancy-related deaths, which it's such an awful, tragic statistic to even have to think about, but it's one of the things that is very real in Iowa and in central Iowa. We need to talk about what happens, some of those adverse outcomes, to be able to make any sort of difference. And so statistically, pregnancy-related deaths, which would be include that year postpartum, 53% of pregnancy-related deaths are 7 days to 1 year after birth. So over half are not during the actual labor and delivery, that immediacy that happens. It's 7 days to 12 months postpartum. And 4 out of 5 of those pregnancy-related deaths have been said by medical professionals to be avoidable. Things like hemorrhage and cardiac events. But actually, unfortunately, the main cause is mental health conditions. So 23% of pregnancy-related deaths are due to something related to a mental health crisis, up and including suicide.
we're really coming more into a place now where we understand that postpartum depression. For years and years, oh, you got the baby blues, and it would kind of be, brushed off that way. But sometimes it is just a fleeting thing, but it can be extremely serious. And I don't remember, of course, it's been a while since I had children, but I don't remember the doctor asking me how I felt emotionally after I gave birth, or even in the pediatrician in the first 12 months of checkups. Is that something that obviously EveryStep is very concerned about that? Are we seeing a turn towards that more now?
We are. I mean, one of the critical barriers to maternal health care, especially in the postpartum period, is access to that medical insurance. And so one of the things that we do for our families in EveryStep and in EveryStep through our Title V grant in our community is to be able to provide presumptive eligibility for Medicaid. And what that is it's short-term, immediate Medicaid that goes into effect when you have different conditions. And pregnancy is one of those conditions. It means that you can get presumptive eligibility done by one of our staff and immediately that day have access to full Medicaid benefits. When that presumptive eligibility is determined, that gets that pregnant woman medical services right there and then. They have access to their full Medicaid benefits on that day, while the rest of the system figures out if long-term Medicaid is going to be an option. Not only do we provide that day of service and Medicaid eligibility, presumptive Medicaid has much different funding levels than traditional Medicaid. So where traditional Medicaid, you would have it with 133% of the federal poverty level, which means a family of three can earn no more than $33,000 a year. With pregnancy and the presumptive eligibility, that's 375% of the federal poverty level, which means a family of three can earn up to $93,000 a year and still be eligible, because we know that prenatal health care and getting into a doctor quickly and having that insurance is critical for health outcomes for not only the child, but for mom.
That is really important. That's an important thing for women to hear, for pregnant people to hear, is that is available to them where you might, I never would have dreamed that. I had no idea.
We have so many folks that we work with, or we're out doing community outreach, and they say, well, we don't qualify for Medicaid. But when you're pregnant, that having that almost triple that eligibility criteria, it will cover so many more folks than maybe that traditional Medicaid would. And the reason is because I always looked around and said, this is such a key time just for the growth and health and well-being of families in Iowa. We need to make sure that we've got folks that are lined up with the best prenatal care. And then that Medicaid serves that family through that just initial postpartum period. And that's kind of the kicker when we're talking about then what happens in that longer postpartum period and what a barrier is. We only have 6 weeks postpartum on that Medicaid if a family isn't eligible for the full range of benefits. And so where a child is born and may be eligible for full Medicaid, that mother may not. And so getting past that traditional medical appointment post-pregnancy, it'll get them through that. But then after that, and we're seeing obviously those statistics, 53% of deaths happen after, 7 to 1 year. If there's not medical care because there's not medical insurance, then that's gonna mean there's a whole group of folks out there that just aren't getting that routine follow-up.
So is this something then that needs to be advocated for on a legislative level?
Yes, and there have been in the past several bills, and I'm hoping that they'll continue to be, introduced into the state legislature about expanding that postpartum period to 12 months.
It seems pretty important, especially given the statistics that you've cited.
It's incredibly important.
What are some of the, we've got this great benefit available to people who are expecting a baby. What are some of the barriers to accessing that or finding out about it or getting enrolled? I'm imagining there's a lot. The first one that comes to my mind are language barriers. Perhaps they're not a fluent English speaker, and that's how they have missed out on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we're able to do as an organization is we are a qualified entity, which means we can enroll folks in that presumptive eligibility. And we also are seen in the community and within our own space as being providing culturally competent or providing services with cultural humility, which means we know that folks are going to learn, grow, and be well best when they are given information in a language that's understandable and most comfortable for them. And so we do our best to make sure that if we don't have staff in person that are able to speak that language, we make sure that we have interpretation available to be able to serve anyone who should come to us, whether that's internally through our EveryStep interpretation programs that serve anywhere from 24 to 27 languages, or we rely on telephonic interpretation lines for some of those languages or dialects that we just may not have capacity for. But currently our primary person doing our presumptive eligibility is bilingual in English and Spanish. And so that's incredibly helpful.
I've had the privilege of attending some of our childbirth classes that we provide. And there are always people in there who do not speak English. And they have one of our interpreters right next to them, speaking to them in their native language about whatever is being said on the screen or the instructor is saying. And it never fails to amaze me that a lot of these people are coming from countries that have a healthcare system completely different from ours, or one that doesn't exist. And the things that I see them teaching that I think, well, duh, that's how you have a baby, or that's what you look for. Those are the signs of, labor, are completely new to some of these people because they haven't been in a society like ours where you're kind of taught that, hopefully. And it's just really nice to see their eyes brighten and, oh, okay. Oh, I understand. It's a great service we provide.
It is. Those childbirth and pregnancy and postpartum classes are amazing. Not only do they provide education, of course, and some navigation of really complex, confusing systems. If you think about just our healthcare system in general, it's difficult. And with health insurance and all of those things, it's difficult for someone who's a native English speaker, was born in the United States, to navigate. I absolutely can't imagine going and, being in Afghanistan and having to navigate a health system, especially after having some, being here potentially as a refugee and having trauma. Even if you did have babies in your home country, this system would be very different than a lot of the refugee and immigrants that we're welcoming into our community. And so having not only that interpretation, but having a liaison to help not only the native English speakers and folks who've lived in this community for their whole lives, they help us navigate that system too. What are the things the practical things that we really need to be educating on? Not only the medical and what your rights are and getting you the access to services. Transportation is another huge barrier. Trying to get to the doctor's appointments on a regular basis, especially if you have other children, and knowing if it's, one parent taking care of, more than one child at home during the day, and trying to utilize a bus system to get, to your medical appointments. Transportation is a barrier. There are a lot of things that go into navigating a healthy pregnancy, and we want to try and eliminate as many barriers as possible.
Well, and if we're talking about maternal health and maternal mortality, we have to talk about Black maternal mortality because Iowa has an unfortunate distinction of having a very high rate of Black maternal mortality. Why are the challenges so much stronger for Black women in Iowa to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby?
We know that Black women who are pregnant have higher instances of high blood pressure or preeclampsia during pregnancy. We know there is greater risk for hemorrhage. There are all sorts of reasons, medical reasons, that are going into those discrepancies. Ultimately, systemic racism is the root of a lot of those causes. And so one of our goals at EveryStep is to be able to impact that maternal mortality rate by addressing the health disparities. And many of the ways that we're doing that is around culturally or racially competent care and with specific targeted interactions. Some of those would be our Black and Birthing class. So a class that curriculum and facilitation is all done by Black birthing educators and folks who really not only know the healthcare and the medical side of things, but also know what it's like to be Black and pregnant. We have a Black doula program where we pair Black pregnant folks with a certified doula who is also of African descent or Black identified. That gives them not only access to someone that looks like them, that can has some of those same experiences, but it also gives some insight into those specific healthcare needs and the things that folks need to be looking at and maybe rising to the attention of medical professionals more quickly. And it's also a doula service is an incredible pairing with that pregnant person. It really is that person's, once you're in labor and you deliver and that baby is born, so much focus goes on to that infant and the newborn. That doula is there for mom during the entire process, and having that educator and that advocate there's nothing that's quite like that. And to have that in a culturally competent space, just nationally has shown to reduce some of those mortality levels.
And talking about the advocacy role of the doula, that's one of the things that has struck me. It's some of the clients that we've worked with have said, they wouldn't listen to me. I'm in the labor delivery room and then they weren't listening to me. But my doula was able to advocate for me because they're in the throes of labor. All right. And maybe have not had the experience of being heard before by a medical professional. And that's what I think in my opinion, is just one of the key things that the doula program really provides for these parents.
It is that the advocacy, not only by the doula on behalf of the birthing person, but also the work with the doula, the work with the nurses, the work with the case managers, the work of, that participant has in every place that EveryStep touches them. Not only will there be that education and that external support, but there will also be this push for that person to know that they intrinsically know themselves and their bodies and their families the best. And so with that intrinsic knowledge, we can help, we can coach, we can lead and mentor. But ultimately, the goal is to make sure that person, that mom, that woman, that birthing person understands that they know themselves and their body and their family the best. And their voice should be enough. But until we get to that point where that they're being heard loudly and clearly, then we're going to just surround them and speak in one united voice as much as we can.
Jen, you are a wealth of information, and I know we're going to have you on the program again because there's so many topics. And EveryStep does so much in regards to maternal health and child health and healthy families and healthy dads. And we have a ton to talk about, so I can't wait to have you on again.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Jen Groves has been our guest today, talking about some of the barriers to maternal health and especially in regards to labor and delivery. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, or you're interested in that Medicaid presumptivity, I think would be the way to say it, we'd love to hear from you. Just go to our website, everystep.org/care, CARE. So go to everystep.org/care, and there will be a form for you to fill out, no commitment, and we can see what we can do to help you out too. That's With You at Every Step, and I thank you for joining us. I'm Polly Carver-Kimm.